Good morning, everyone. This is Dr. Mailer. Hope you're doing well. Hope you're staying safe at this difficult time. Hard to believe that this is our last week of the STEM Challenge course, and we're going to be looking at Chapter 15, which is a long chapter, and there are a number of animations that I'd like you to watch in this that may have questions on our quiz. Our quiz is going to be this Friday. It'll be our last quiz. It'll combine Chapter 14 and Chapter 15 with a few questions of Ed Young, chapters 9 and 10. We have a total of 30 questions on that quiz, so it's just about the same as all of our normal quizzes. Chapter 15 is a long chapter. The concepts aren't difficult, and remember, this is not intended as a full lecture, but more as a mini lecture to point out important points that you should study. So let's get started. 15.1 talks about community interactions, and we're going to talk about what a community is. A community is the biotic part of an ecosystem, so that's all the plants and animals in that. A population is one species. A community is all the species together. Very important in community is the sense of interactions. What's meant by interactions? One of those interactions is predation, and your textbook talks about predation there. Make sure you read that. In a community, many times there is what's called a keystone species, and it's one that plays an especially important role in the community. And if the keystone species is lost, a lot of times it has a ripple effect on other species in the community. Adaptations to predation, things like camouflage, are really, really important because those are adaptations that makes it easier for one particular population, one species to live in a particular community. So make sure you read about that. You'll read about different types of symbiotic relationships. These are relationships between two different species. One called mutualism is an example here with the multicolored shrimp and the goby fish behind it. That's a yellowish green goby fish, and in the foreground to the bottom there is a shrimp. And you'll read about that. Also, areas can change, and they can when they can change sometimes from bare rock, and that's called primary succession. For example, when a lava flows out of a volcano or glacier retreats back, we have a lot of that going on in our world right now. When bare rock is exposed, life will come in. And if it's bare rock, that's called primary succession. And if it is not, it's called secondary succession. This is the first of the animations that I'd like you to take a look at. And this talks about feedback loops within ecosystems. Really well done. This one is about conservation of fish in the ocean, a huge issue right now. Also, take a look at that. This is also about different relationships in ecosystems, and this is about the adaptations that squid have to escape their prey. Some very interesting animations that talk about the relationships within a community. In 15.2, we start talking about populations, and in populations, they'll have an introduction. They'll talk about size, density, distribution. If we look at this next slide, populations within an ecosystem. Now imagine each of these squares. These squares are supposed to be super huge. These are like, I don't know, maybe 4 square miles of a particular ecosystem. These are not little areas. But they're talking about that organisms can be clumped together. They can be random. They can be uniform. I think a lot of students sometimes think that some or most species are uniformly spread out over an ecosystem, and that's just not true. They tend to be more clumped in the first one. Right here is a link to a YouTube video on the population pyramid. And this one this deals strictly with human population. I'd like you to watch this closely. I think you'll find it interesting where they compare the shape of the population pyramid between different countries. Just a brief overview. Right here, these are all the females in a population. Right here, all the males, so blue here, pink here. This is the age up here, and these are increments. The animation will give you a little more information. Really interesting what a population pyramid will do for you. Read about survivorship curves. This is fairly straightforward. There's 3 types of curves, type 1, type 2, and type 3. And it's really a combination of death rate and mortality rate. So take a look at that. Here's the equation. for population growth rate. This stands for the population growth rate is R, and then B is the birth rate minus immigration minus death rate plus emigration with an E. So take a look at that equation. Make sure you're familiar with it. Logistic growth. We've heard a lot about logistic growth on the news, unfortunately, with how the coronavirus is growing. Make sure you read about that. Human population growth. In 15.3, we talk specifically about humans, and this is a classic from 10,000 years ago all the way up to right around here, the Industrial Revolution, around 1800. The number of humans was well below, here's 1 billion, was well below, but we've been experiencing logistical growth over the last couple hundred years. And there's lots of reasons for that. One of the reasons is we've learned how to make lots and lots of food for lots and lots of people. Another reason is our medicine has gotten really good. Unfortunately, the coronavirus has exposed a gap in our understanding of disease because of how virulent and how fast-moving coronavirus has been. This is another graph. This is a more detailed graph of what you just saw. You can take a look at this for more information. And this talks about early human population growth of Homo sapiens. When we read Sapiens a few weeks back, they gave you an overview of this. Just read about this. The important point here is around when we had agriculture, which was when we invented agriculture about 10,000 years ago. Here's stages of demographic transition. Read that. That's fairly straightforward. And this is what the census of 2010 predicted for what the world would look like in 2050. How India will have more people than China. How the U.S. will remain the third populous. Read through that. There's some really interesting things about the future. So what does all this mean? They'll talk about what we need to do to prepare for more people. Most people think that human population will level off at about 7 billion people. One of the last things in chapter 15 is something called the biodiversity crisis. Because we have so many people on our planet, people are going into habitats which normally we didn't go into. And those habitats had lots of different living things, and it's harder for them to live. So keeping biodiversity alive, keeping the number of different species that are on our planet is really important to a lot of biologists, a lot of people everywhere. And some people think that, we have to 100% preserve every spot piece of land. Some people say, no, we can develop everything we want. Nothing is sacred. And really, the answer lies in between here. It relies in managing our resources. I'll give you one quick example. Years ago, I taught an environmental class where about half the students were active environmentalists and were really passionate about saving the environment. And the other half, not half, maybe a third, were hunters in Pennsylvania, and they loved to hunt. And the two really saw themselves as adversaries in this class around this time. And what I tried to tell the class was, no, we are way past the age of we have to preserve everything or we have to develop everything. Really what we have to do is we have to manage our resources. And the hunters in Pennsylvania, for example, if we had not managed the deer herd in Pennsylvania, none of you would have ever seen a deer in Pennsylvania. Just wouldn't have happened. But hunters have helped the wildlife management associations to maintain the deer population, keep it healthy. It's just one example. Another example is we have to learn to manage our ocean resources. That's very critical right now. So take a look at this and read what biodiversity is. It talks about how many species there are on our planet. It's estimated that we have over 9 million. That's still only an estimate. Take a look at this graph, the number of known organisms and what their type is. We have eubacteria, protists, fungi, plants, and then animals of the 1.8 million. But look at animals. Most of our animals are, if we take a look at this, we have a total of 1.3 million, but most of our animals, 1.2 million, are invertebrates. And most of those, if we look at the purple down here, most of those are just insects. These are the known species of plants. There's about 300,000 species of plants. Notice this. Remember we said that flowering plants were a very successful type of plant? Look at how successful it's been. Almost 3/4 of all plant species are flowering plants. They're dicots. And then over here, we have flowering plants that are monocots, but then mosses, ferns, and conifers, which are older plants, older in the sense that they've been around longer on our planet, make up the rest. So read about why biodiversity is important, especially the economic benefits of biodiversity, and also a phrase that many of you may have not heard. It's called ecosystem services. And ecosystem services are the things that healthy ecosystems, a healthy ecological framework gives us every day. Really, really important that you understand how important a healthy planet is. Not a lot of people do. Remember, you guys have to be advocates for science. You're science and math majors, and we really need your voice in the general population to talk about why things are important, why we shouldn't do things like pollution and habitat loss to keep our ecosystems alive and well. Read over this. This is not out of, I won't ask you any questions about the sixth mass extinction because that's fairly controversial, but read over this page here. The Encyclopedia of Life is a project, a collaborative encyclopedia intended to document all the living species of life. And I'd like to recommend, that's just the end of chapter 15. There are a couple books that I'd like to recommend. One from a non-scientist, but an incredible writer, and really makes science accessible to lots of people. His name is Bill Bryson, and he's written a book called A Short History of Nearly Everything. And I'm just reading a book just came out a couple months ago, The Body, A Guide for Occupants. Nutza is helping me with that, so thank you. I appreciate that. And then from a very well-known scientist, an Indian-American scientist by the name of Siddhartha Mukherjee. He won the Pulitzer Prize for The Emperor of All Maladies, which is a biography of cancer. And that was turned into a PBS special. And then another book called The Gene by him was also turned into a PBS special called An Intimate History. I highly recommend these books if you're looking for something over the summer to read. Good luck. Let me know if I can help in any way going forward. And it's something I'll talk a little bit about at the Zoom meeting next Monday at 10. You'll get a separate invitation. It was a delight teaching this class. I'm sorry about the way we ended up, but just let me know if I can help in any way. I'm going to stop this and we'll post this.